All right, folks, the sun is rising on the first day of Brawl in the Bluegrass here in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm going to be doing something a bit different. I'm going to do a video blog, or a vlog as the kids say, and document the tournament. All right, now we're on I-75 heading north to go check out the Iron Wind Metals location. Inept, aka Popcorn from the MRC, is at the wheel. Why do they call you Inept, Matt? Or rather, I should say, why are you also known as Popcorn?
The Inept was that was my invention for misspelling it because I thought it was funny. And also it allowed at the time to have a handle that didn't have numbers in it, which was important to me. Popcorn is actually from the MRC. Pirate was talking about some pilot thing, and I was just like, oh, yeah, like if we had popcorn kernels and you get it sweltering in the cockpit, and the popcorn would go off. He'd just do that as a prank to scare someone. And he renamed me in the Discord with the popcorn name, and I've just never removed it.
Oh, that's a good prank. Hey, here we are at Iron Wind Metals, where the BattleTech magic happens. This was their BattleTech display case, which had a lot of cool stuff in it. I meant to ask what the story was about that giant vulture, but I never did. One thing they told us that I didn't realize is that when they model things like animals, like you see a horse here, they actually design a skeleton for it first to make sure the proportions are right. And this is what a mold looks like, ready for miniatures to be cast. Here we have an example of one of the centrifuges that they use. You know, they put those molds inside there, they close the thing, put the metal down through the middle, and spin it so that the metal diffuses out into the pieces of the mold. They had a giant warehouse that we were able to browse and then look for BattleTech miniatures and purchase them by the pound. It's kind of a discounted price that was a very nice deal. As you can see, if you want imps, they have plenty of imps in stock. Miniatures that are miscast end up back in the pool of new metal, so there's not a lot of metal wasted. Ended up going pretty modest with my purchases, just a couple of things that were big gaps in my collection. I got a couple of mechs, an Anvil and a Grand Titan, which are staple mechs for any mercenary that for some reason I didn't have. And then I got a few VTOLs. I got a Cavalry, which is of course an awesome close range attack VTOL. I got a Hawkmoth, I got a Warrior H7. Unfortunately, they didn't have the Yellow Jacket in stock, which I wanted, but yeah, overall, you know, a decent haul, and I didn't go too crazy in shopaholic. All right, so with everyone back from Iron Wind, the action has moved to the Rusty Scabbard game store for the Trial of Bloodright. Chosen this Gargoyle E for my starting mech. It's got quite a mix of weapons. Targeting computer, always very nice. Heavy medium lasers, very powerful. It doesn't have great long-ranged firepower, but hopefully it'll be enough to take me to some victories here. They're matching up for 1v1 games in a single elimination bracket to decide who ends up with a new clan Goliath Scorpion blood name. I have a bye for the first round, so I'm going to be just spectating. Unfortunately, after my bye, my first opponent was Brad, aka Devian, who, you know, is reputed to be one of the best players in the MRC in terms of skill. This was the first time I had played him, but he certainly lived up to that reputation. And I made the mistake of giving him I was able to choose what mech he used from two that he had, and I chose the Nova Cat with the huge number of LRM-15s, so he was just able to blast my Man-O-War, totally destroy it before I was able to really get very close into effective range. The other option was a Thor 2, and I actually blundered here because I didn't realize that the Thor 2 didn't have jump on every one of its variants. I thought jump would be really good on the map, but little did I know that the Thor 2 variant that he had didn't actually have jump jets. The final round battle was between a Warhammer 2C and a Mackie, and the Mackie won, which was very cool. And people thought it was very in keeping with the legacy of Clan Goliath Scorpion and their interest in relics. The pilot of the Mackie and the winner of the blood name Suvorov was Brian, also known as Skullfire. Here we see him quite proud, I think, to have won the blood name. So that was the first day. As a little footnote, this is what the liquor stores look like in Kentucky, which to this Michigan man was quite a sight. It's morning, the day of the classic BattleTech event, which is the one I'm participating in. Dark skies. Hopefully that is a portent of bad luck for my opponents and not for me. I'm repping Brotherwise Games. Not in any official capacity, but I just love those guys and they gave me a hat, so I'm wearing it. And I have my homemade BattleTech jacket on, so I'm all set to go. My lance is ready to go too. Being at this event has reinforced to me what a bad painter I am compared to most of the serious players, so I'm not going to zoom in too close on these guys, but check out the cool 3D terrain we've got. So my first game was against Chris, whose MRC handle is Warning. He's also a kind of Clan Ghost Bear lore master within the MRC. You'll see a very cool Ghost Bear costume that he has later on in the video. But anyway, our game was kind of low action in a certain sense. We played on this map with a giant lake at the center, and it kind of got in the way of having too much of a melee. The mission objective was a kill the commander mission, so I chose as my commander my Venom because, with that kind of speed and jump capability, it's pretty easy to keep it out of trouble. Whereas he chose a Grizzly for his commander and kept it back to use as a sniper. Unfortunately, the Grizzly rolled really poorly in terms of its long-range weapons, so only one mech was destroyed in the course of the battle. I head-capped one of his bear cubs with a PPC. I had pretty good luck with my tanks, and they didn't get critted out too quickly, which was a pattern that displayed itself over the course of my games, which I couldn't complain about. So that game was really low scoring on both of our sides, and I ended up winning it primarily because I was the only one to destroy a mech. I also crippled one of his larger jumping mechs. My second game was against an opponent that I've played a few times on Mega Mech, Luke, also known as Kaiser. So he brought a very nice Draconis Combine force that was spearheaded by a Sunder. Unfortunately for him, I got really lucky and fairly early on got a cockpit crit against that Sunder and destroyed it with just a PPC shot. This wasn't even a head capping weapon. I don't actually really have, I have one head capping weapon in my whole list. So, but over the course of the tournament, I actually got a lot of really devastating 10-point headshots, which is quite lucky. And I also headshotted and destroyed his Owens pretty early in the game. So early on in this game, I had a whole lot of luck, and I felt like I was getting quite a bit ahead, and I felt pretty confident. Unfortunately, I really blew it. So it was a data gathering, signal tracing kind of mission. What we were supposed to do is pick up fuel from this center objective and take it out to the edge. And we did about equally good jobs of doing that. I was a little slower in terms of getting to the objective than he was, but eventually I was able to pick up a fair bit of fuel and return some of it to my edge with at least the Venom. So going into the last turn of the game, again, due to this excellent dice luck I had, we were about equal in terms of achieving the objective, but I was ahead on combat score by a significant amount. Unfortunately, then I just blundered. I had the opportunity to destroy his Wolverine, and I was kind of focusing fire on it with a number of my units, and I decided to just move the Falconer kind of slowly to get a good shot against the Wolverine. The Falconer was a little bit vulnerable at that point. It had taken some hits, and also it's by far my highest BV unit, so I really should have put more effort into protecting it that last turn, and it did actually get destroyed. And we actually ended up tying up the game. It was a complete tie. We also realized a little ways into the game that I was making a rules mistake, which is just something that I am unfortunately very prone to in tabletop play. I was forgetting to add the side arc increased odds of a motive crit to my vehicles. So this is something I'm going to have to make a note on my record sheets about in the future, because it is definitely, this isn't the first time that I have made a similar mistake to this. It's hard using vehicles because you don't use them all the time. It's easy to have the rules for the mechs memorized. But anyway, I appreciate Luke pointing out that I was making that mistake. And I especially appreciate him not getting too upset about the fact that I was making a mistake that was kind of advantageous to me. So, hats off to him. He's a great sportsman. So here we have a picture of my final game against Aaron, also known as Fastcam, who had kind of a fun Merrick list. It was actually literally just a Lance. So he was able to get some very high-skilled pilots on some very dangerous mechs. A Wraith and 3 big chonkers, including an AC-20 Banshee that had precision autocannon 20 ammo. This was one of those missions where the objective moved around the board quite a bit. And at first I got pretty lucky in the sense that I was able to kind of prevent him from getting to his objective, or at least get one of my mechs in the way of his objective a little bit. You can see here I was backing the Falconer up to kind of block the Wraith. But then after that, I had kind of bad luck with the objective, and it ended up in a corner where I wasn't really able to get a mech to it in time. And we kind of ran the clock out. I also didn't have as much success in combat after the first couple rounds, where I was lucky and I knocked over the Banshee early. And I had some high ground in the center, as you can see there, including some partial cover from a lot of his mechs. But eventually his mechs were just hardier than mine, more heavily armored, more standard engines. The Crusader has an XL gyro and an XL engine, so it's a vulnerable mech. And at this point, the Albatross was already dead. The tanks obviously have significant vulnerabilities. So at the end of the day, just the weight of his firepower and armor was able to basically defeat me. So I ended up 1 win, 1 tie, 1 defeat. There were a lot of great players at the tournament, and everybody that I played was a strong player. So I don't feel bad about these results at all, although I do feel a little bad about the blunder that I made against Kaiser in the second round, because, when the dice hand you a relatively easy game against a pretty tough player, you got to take that opportunity and not screw it up, and I did. But I told myself at the beginning of the event, look, you're playing 3 games on the tabletop in one day. You're going to be doing like a full 8-hour day of BattleTech. You're going to make mistakes. It's impossible to play that much and not get exhausted and make a bunch of mistakes. And that's what happened. That's just the reality of how my brain works when I have to play that much BattleTech. So here we have the awards ceremony at the end of the Day 1 Classic BattleTech tournament. And you can see there Warning in his awesome Ghost Bear costume at the center of the whole thing. The prize table had a bunch of cool stuff. And I did actually end up being able to run to the prize table relatively early in the prize process, and ended up with a copy of the Field Manual Capellan Confederation, which was an awesome thing to grab. I love having the field manuals in paper form. I like reading them when I'm falling asleep at night. And this one was one that I didn't have, so very exciting prize for me to grab. Day 2, I had to go home, but I stuck around until after lunch to spectate on the Alpha Strike tournament. The terrain, again, was very cool looking, as you can see here, and there were a lot of really impressively painted armies there. Lots of cool stuff. I'm not somebody who knows much about Alpha Strike, but it seemed like people were playing at a really high level, and the scenarios seemed very interesting. Here we have a cool bridge battle scene. So the Lyran vehicles that you see there, as well as the yellow painted mech, are from Inept, and then the green painted mechs that you see are actually from Josh from the Mech Bay podcast, who was the winner of the best painted army for this tournament. So, I would say if you're watching this on your phone, go to your computer and blow up the image a bit because you'll see some really nice paint jobs on those green mechs. Let me just close with a big shout out to Jeff, also known as Tweezer, from the Coolant Pod podcast, who ran the tournament as the TO. His work on this was incredible. The scenarios were really well thought out. The terrain was awesome, as you saw in my photos. Such a cool experience. I mean, it's really something to play BattleTech on that kind of isomorphic terrain where you can see how tall the hills are and how that compares with the height of your mech, as well as just the feeling of realism of being there in a real battle that you get from that kind of terrain. Such a cool experience and such a great tournament. Also, I mean, he brought together a whole bunch of awesome people. We had a really fun night of BattleTech trivia at the end of the first night of the Classic tournament. And that was really one of the most enjoyable parts of it, actually. There was some cool stuff that came out. I was really surprised at the depth of BattleTech knowledge that people have. I mean, I personally, there were a couple of questions that I answered for the group, but you know, I certainly don't walk around having it memorized how many tons the 400 standard fusion engine is. But apparently some people do just have that knowledge at the front of their mind. So that's awesome. Good on them. All right, thanks a lot for watching my Brawl in the Bluegrass saga. I hope you folks enjoyed. Those of you who didn't make the tournament, I hope this was a nice opportunity to live vicariously through me. And I, hope and expect, fingers crossed, that there will be another Brawl in the Bluegrass next year. And again, I hope that I'll be able to make it. So maybe someday I'll see some of you folks in Lexington, Kentucky. Have a good one.